Welcome back to the podcast, and today we have Betty G. Now, I don't know much about Betty G, and that's the way I like things. I don't like to know anything about a conversation. That's how you treat people out there on the streets, strangers, like mine. Well, you hope that they're a like of mine. But my brother had the pleasure to be on Betty's show, which is...
Betty, take it away, because I think it's the IANDS podcast.
As it's the IANDS podcast. It's called Explore the Extraordinary, and it's on the IANDS YouTube channel, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies.
So if you haven't seen that, you guys got to jump on that immediately. It's a pretty good show.
Yeah, and Betty's a great interviewer, and a lot of her podcasts that she's done with other indie ears are really great. So you would love that. And we'll leave the link in the description, and she will also... throw it at you at the end of the podcast.
Lob it. The Aaron Rodgers of spiritual throwing.
There it is. Betty, we're going to let you tell your story because I only know a hint of it, but the floor is yours. Tell them who you are. Tell them where that Betty train is going and where it's been.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, thanks for this space. I'm excited that you guys haven't heard my story, because most of the time when I go on podcasts, the person has heard my story. So I'm ready to shock and amaze you.
Shock and awe, baby. Shock and awe.
Even if it's just the two of you, I'm ready for it.
Let's do it.
Super excited. So I'm going to preface it with a trigger warning. I'm going to say a lot of triggering things. My life before my experience was racked in trauma and suffering, and I grew up in a really impoverished, addicted family, and everything that goes along with that. So like addiction and sexual trauma, emotional, physical trauma, all of those things. And I thought that my life was very normal growing up, because that's just all that I was exposed to. And it wasn't until I got older and I saw that other kids didn't have a long orange extension cord going from their apartment to another one to have the lights turn on. Or, you know, other kids' moms, they weren't stealing pounds of cold cuts in their purse at the grocery store. And it took me a long time to realize that my life was innately different than other people. My parents were both addicts. Their parents taught them how to use. My parents taught me how to use. And it's been that way for generations and generations. And it's exhausting being the one to break all the generational curses, but I guess that's what I'm doing. And my parents, they were really, really bad in their addiction in the end. And in 2007, I experienced a really traumatic loss. My parents committed suicide with one another to end their suffering with their addiction. They didn't even know that there was a way to just stop using drugs. They thought that they had to die. And they thought that that was the best thing to do. I was 23 when that happened, and my sister was 18, and we found them. And in the moment of my parents' death, my addiction stepped in, and it became my parent. It became my guiding star. Every ounce of me just screamed for relief from the emotional pain, from the abandonment, from the perceived rejection. And so my addiction spoke to me very loud, and it said, I'll never leave you. I'll never abandon you like they did. It's me and you together forever, but it's got to be just me and you. And so my addiction came before everything in my life. I abandoned my sister. She was just a kid. I just left her and I moved across the country. I said, I can't deal with this. And my addiction came before every relationship. I've been married and divorced a couple of times. No husband was more important than my relationship with my addiction. No job, no apartment, no pet, no friendship, nothing. My addiction rocked and rolled me into the ground. I'm even covered in tattoos of liquor bottles and packs of cigarettes. It branded me. It was my whole identity, my entire personality. And in 2019, I had hit so many bottoms with my addiction in my life. But in 2019, I experienced an overdose. And in that overdose, that was really, a very transformative experience. This is where my spiritual experience took place. The first part of my spiritual experience felt a lot like a life review. And I experienced my parents' suicide. That was the first part of my life review. I didn't just experience it from my perspective as a grieving daughter, I experienced it from their perspective. I felt this pain, this ocean of anguish. It felt like spikes and static attached to every cell of my being. And it felt like I was weighted in cement. So it kind of felt like how I would perceive some people would describe some sort of hell. That was what this experience was feeling like for me. And I'm not just a person who experienced a lot of trauma in my life. I am a traumatized person who traumatized other people. Like, I'm not some sort of victim. I became a perpetrator at some point in my life. And so in my life review, I also started to experience that. I had caused so much harm to so many people in real, tangible ways, not just like, oh, I took $5 out of your wallet. Like, I'm talking like, yeah, inflicting sexual trauma on people, like real, just, yeah, really dense, dark experiences. And I started to experience all of that. Again, it was as if I was condemning myself. It felt like my own sort of personal hell. And then I started to hear these masculine voices, and they were guiding me into the light. And the first voice that I heard was my own divine masculine energy presented itself. And then it morphed into every man that had ever been present in my life. My father being the first one that really presented himself to me as a voice that I truly recognized. And he just kept telling me, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And so I started to follow his voice, and I left that feeling of anguish, that feeling of despair and static. And I started to travel up into this feeling of freedom and home and security and reunion. And the first part of my experience, I kind of decked on what felt like a spaceship. It actually looked a lot like the Gravitron ride at carnivals. If you guys
Oh
remember
yeah.
that, it's a
Oh yeah.
ride that looks like a spaceship. It spins really fast. There's no gravity inside of it. It felt like I came out of the side of one of those walls. And I was on this deck, and there were thousands of other souls all around me. And we were gearing up for our mission to Earth. And there was a commander in the center, this bright, effervescent light. And you can call that commander Christ or Krishna or Buddha or higher consciousness or source, because they're all the same thing. And this commander was telling us that we are divine spiritual soldiers getting ready to jump to Earth for the mission of the Great Awakening. And all of these beings were so lit up and so excited for this mission. And then my awareness shifted to another scene, and I found myself in front of a table of beings. And they were thumbing through this book. And they said, nice to see you. You're not meant to stay. You're only here for information, and then you'll be going back. And I'm like looking over my shoulders. I'm like, you guys aren't talking to me, are you? Because I don't know where I am, but it feels way better than where I just was. And I'm definitely not going back to where I just was. And they're thumbing through the book, and they're being, very dismissive. No, 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 you're not meant to stay here. And I kind of transformed into a small child. I imagined myself like banging my fists and my feet on the ground. I will not go back. You cannot make me go back. I affirmed out to them, you guys don't tell us what Earth is actually like. I'm not going back there. And they said, you're here for information about your mission. So then they took me through the details of my pre-birth plan. So how some people believe in an afterlife, right? They were showing me that there's actually a process of life before life, and that there's a whole planning process that goes into picking a person's life and a soul's mission. So the way that I perceived it in my mind's eye, it looked a lot like a video game. And that could be because of the generation that I'm born in, or because we're living in a simulation. You can take your pick. So this man presented himself to me like this NPC. It was this guy wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora, and he had this empty grocery cart, and he said, okay, let's pick your life. And I started walking down the aisles of a grocery store, and lining the aisles were these giant cereal boxes. And every cereal box had a life experience on it. And I knew the family line that I was going to be born into because I had picked my parents, and I knew that I was going to Earth for the Great Awakening. And part of that mission was transmuting negative energy. So I had picked a family line that I knew was going to have a lot of dark, dense experience, like addiction and sexual trauma and poverty and things like that. So I start grabbing all the other aspects of my life that I would like to plan or that was going to go into that family line. And I'm grabbing everything. I have no bounds. I don't know what I'm actually signing up for. So I start grabbing everything. And I mean crazy stuff. Like prostitution was one of my life experiences, homelessness, the addiction, the depravity that goes along with it, the dereliction, being a perpetrator, being a predator to people, all of these things. And the one life experience that really sticks out very vividly for me is that I grabbed this cereal box of childhood sexual trauma. And when I grabbed it, there was an orb of light that came out with it. And that orb of light was the soul of the man who would be my perpetrator in this part of my story. And we came orb to orb with each other, and we came into contract with one another. And I saw all the reasons why. I saw that I was going to be transmuting this for the collective, for the Great Awakening. And I also saw that in a previous life, I had been this man's abuser in the same capacity, but the roles were reversed. And so in the moment of being downloaded and shown my pre-birth planning, it was like 2 tons of bondage had been released from me. I was no longer a victim to my circumstance. I was actually a divine co-creator of my experience. Things had no longer happened to me, they happened for me. Because on some soul level, I chose it for the evolvement of myself. Now, my human understanding cannot understand how something like childhood sexual trauma will evolve me as a soul. But today I have this unwavering faith that I don't need to know why. I don't need to know why certain experiences happen to certain people. I just have this deep-seated faith that it's all happening in divine right order. So I went back into the table of beings and I thanked them for this information. Oh my goodness, I feel so much better knowing this. This is such freedom for me. I'm still not going back to Earth, but I'm so grateful to have all of this information. Thank you so much. I'm going to go grab my pajamas and a bowl of popcorn. I'm going to watch the show from up here. Let me just go find a cozy couch to curl up on. And they were like, listen, this is not a punishment. You're not going back as a punishment. You're going back because you signed up for something. You wanted to be part of the evolution of consciousness, and we're not going to let you miss your opportunity. And I said, well, listen, I can't go back into the body that I just came from because she's a mess. And I'm not going back into her. And they said, okay, you don't have to go back into her, but you do have to go back. And so we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And again, this baby was going to take on my life experience cart. And then because of the family line that she was choosing to be born into, she had even deeper levels of societal adversity to overcome. And I thought, man, if my only options are going back into that glitched body that I just came from or starting from zero, I guess I'm going back into her. And I started to feel my awareness to sift back into my body. And I heard the Council of Beings very loudly. And they said, listen, the first part of your life was boot camp. And the second part of your life will be carrying out the mission. It's not going to be nearly as challenging. You're going to have soulmates and mentors and teachers and kindred spirit and community. And just trust us. It's not going to be as bad as it was. And I was like, I do not trust you guys, whatever. And I found myself back in my body. And I just wrote the whole thing off as drug-induced psychosis. All I knew was that I took a bunch of drugs and then I thought I was talking to God, So like, I just kept living my life the way that I was. I kept causing harm. I kept prostituting myself. I kept abusing myself. I kept pumping myself full of drugs. And then my universe just got so small and tiny. And all of these divine synchronicities started to happen. And again, I'm coming from zero spiritual awareness. I was a militant, staunch atheist. My life had been so challenging. I didn't want to believe in God or anything bigger than myself. Drugs were my God. So there was no space for any actual higher power. And my life just got so small and tiny. Like all my drug dealers on the exact same day, they all stopped selling drugs. Like it was so
Wow.
divine. I'd call up one guy, I'd be like, "Hey man, what's up? I need to pick up." No, no, I don't do that anymore. I'm out of the game. I'm like, "What do you mean? I just saw you yesterday." "Yeah, man, don't call me anymore. Lose my number." I'm like, "Okay, weird." I'd call up the next guy. Same exact story. But these guys didn't know each other. So then I was out of options. I had no way to get what I needed. And I had a physical dependency to heroin, and I was so scared of getting sick. I think that's why so many people stay strung out on drugs for so long, is this fear of being physically ill when it comes to that particular kind of substance anyway. And I found myself on day 3 of withdrawal, which is like the absolute worst day. And I was so sick, and I felt my parents, like I felt what they must have been feeling. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to kill myself to make this pain stop. There's no way that I can get through this." And then I heard this voice, and it told me that I could request what I wanted fixed. And so I was like in the throes of desperation. I was like, "Okay, strange voice, I want to no longer be physically dependent on heroin." I didn't say that I wanted to be rid of my drug addiction, because I still definitely wanted to use other drugs. I just didn't want to be in physical pain from this one substance. And as they told me to lay my head back, and I lay down in my bed, and these two little men appeared in my mind's eye. And every time I tell the story, I see them, they like wave to me. They're like, "Hey, we're still here." So these two little men appeared in my mind's eye, and they had these lawnmowers in front of them. And I watched these two little men map out every crevice of my mind. And as they did, I felt these intense hot tingles. And I just knew that something miraculous was happening, because how am I perceiving all of this? And again, I'm in the throes of desperation. This is the bottom of rock bottom. This is a moment of mental and spiritual suicide for myself. And this was the saving moment for me. So after these guys are done mapping out my mind, I feel somebody draw X's across my forehead, and this plunger on the crown of my head, and this bright white flash. And in that moment, I'm instantaneously healed out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal.
Wow.
I mean, moments before, I was sick all over myself, welcoming death. It felt like my bones were made of fire, like my skin was made of broken glass. It was the most epic pain that you could ever imagine, without anything actually being wrong with you, which is the most messed up part about it. And there I was, and I was completely well and healed and fine. And I threw myself on the ground, and I was crying out to the divine. And I was saying, "How could this be happening to me? I don't believe in this. I don't believe in you. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on." And for the contrast of my experience, I was an atheist, an orphan to suicide. I was a homeless meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I was a rapist. I was a racist. I was all of the things that you would think would condemn you to the exact opposite of what was happening to me. And there I was, unconditionally loved and saved by the grace of the divine. And so after that, after that, I thought that I was the second coming of Christ. I was like, "Hey, everybody, I can heal you. Let me just lay my hands on you." I was crazy. I was like on the New York City subway system, proselytizing and evangelizing. It was crazy and chaotic. But when the dust started to settle, I realized that I had to do recovery, and that I had to change every single one of my belief systems, that nothing I thought was the way that things really are. And so I found myself through some more signs and synchronicities in a long-term rehab. I stayed inpatient for a year and a half, which is an incredibly long amount of time. And while I was there, I just had this insatiable thirst for knowledge. I started to read every sacred text. I read everything I could get my hands on about metaphysics and the law of attraction. I began to manifest my reality. And here I am today, living in a beautiful home with a wonderful career that's based around service. I belong to multiple spiritual communities, that I've met the members of my soul family, those souls that I was on that ship with, that we were getting ready to jump to earth together. I found them. I found them here on earth, and we create beautiful conscious space together. I've dismantled all of my limiting belief systems, and I've been able to hop into the most optimal timeline for myself. And if that's possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. I cannot even explain to you what kind of depraved animal I was before my spiritual experience, but it's not the person that's sitting here today. And if that kind of grace is available to me, I know that it's available to anybody. And that's my experience. Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, and it's a hell of an experience.
Yeah.
You know, and from my NDE, which we kind of all know about, I'm glad that you said, well, what I took away from yours was because you were still you know, I'm kicking and screaming. I'm glad that I'm not the only one that could perceive that they were still, you know, themselves. You know, at not any point was I of an enlightened mind and went into this shamanistic mode. I was still like I could tell you the raunchy jokes, and I would still say, like, I would think outlandish things, you know. And I'm just really glad to hear that you had that. But what I really want to go back to is who do you think the person was, or if it was a person, of the addiction portion, the addiction personality? Do you think that was a higher self of you?
Wow, that's a really great question. So, part of my healing process has been doing a lot of shadow work. And the way that I perceive and the way that I exercise shadow work is that I dismantle the parts of myself. So my addiction is his own personality. He's a man. He's a gay man. He's crazy. His name is Richard. And so for me, that version of me was him. But he was my whole personality. And the thing about my addiction is that that part of me was protecting me. It was protecting me from feelings that were too big. You know, like, I honestly don't know if I could have gotten through my parents' suicide without using drugs and alcohol. Like, it was a very, very intense life shift. And so I think for a while I needed the drugs to get through that. But then at some point, the drugs started to use me instead of me using them. But I do think that I don't necessarily think that it's some sort of lower entity or anything like that. I think that it's a shadow aspect of myself. But I also know that it's something that I signed up for. Addiction and recovery are definitely major plot points in my pre-birth planning.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think it was a part of you that was keeping you back on track to get the lesson that you signed up for?
Yeah, I think, well, so like the thing about pre-birth planning is that it's not very rigid. It's not like, oh my God, if I don't hit this plot point, my whole life is worthless. It's not super rigid, but I do think that there are divine sort of bumpers. Like I picture a bowling alley with the bumpers on the side. There's things that will shift us from place to place, especially when we're in awareness. When I am living in a state of awareness, I'm much more aware of the fact that there's other things guiding me in directions, whether it's like, don't turn left down this street, walk one more block and then go left, or, whatever it might be. But I do think that there was some sort of supernatural help to help me get me on the path, for sure.
Do you find it funny that before your spiritual events, Source in essence wiped your memory? After your spiritual event, it restored your memory. Why do you think Source chooses to do that to certain individuals and not all of us?
That is such a great question. I think that one of the main purposes of the earth experience, of the human experience, is that we come here to forget so that we can remember. And everyone has access to remembrance. You don't have to die. You don't have to have some sort of profound spiritual transformation to come into a state of remembrance. There's access in so many places. There's so many books and authors and wonderful spiritual teachers that teach us about remembrance. It's just about how open-minded are you. Some people are stuck in that one track human into a whole nother layer of life, which is spiritual awareness and spiritual awakening. So, but I really do think that one of the greatest, most amazing things here is to forget so that we can remember. And I forget on a daily basis, and I have to come back into a state of remembrance. So I always end cap my days. I remember as soon as I wake up, and I make sure that I remember right before I go to bed. And sometimes I remember in between.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And back to your other point, I was telling myself, like, well, my higher self was saying, we signed up for this. We wanted to do this. You promised we do this. And that's also a good, I think that some NDEers have that in common, and then what I didn't have, which I think you had, was a life review. Would you say that a portion of that living through your parents' eyes, was that similar to your life review?
Yeah, the life review part of it, I didn't have language for it before. And, the language has come to me in the last couple of years around it. What it felt like was that I was having a life review for the whole world, because I was experiencing things in my life review that didn't actually happen to me. Like, I felt my mother's trauma. My mother was raped by her brother for like 6 years of her life. And I felt that, but I don't have a brother. I wasn't raped by a brother. So I couldn't understand. I was feeling that. And so I thought that I was just feeling things for the whole world. It felt like a download of the entire earth experience, but definitely at least my family line for sure. I guess that's because like that's what I could most comprehend. But the idea, the feeling of that devastation, the suffering, it was so intense. And that's all that my life was up until that point, was suffering. My life was so depraved. So to feel it in that review, today I make every day of my life a living life review. I make sure each day to check in with myself. What was great today? Where did I see God today? What could I do better tomorrow? I don't have to wait until the end of my life to experience a life review. I can continue to be the best version of myself every day if I so choose.
Mm-hmm. Those, tell me about that, about like my experience was so real. Like, I can tell you it's realer than this conversation. Can you elaborate more when you met the beings at the table? Like, what did they look like, and what was like? Did you have a body? And then how real was it for you?
So when I woke up in the space of eternity, it felt like I was waking up from a dream. So I could only grab about 3 seconds of my human life, and those 3 seconds were that my parents had committed suicide, and I couldn't remember anything else from 35 years of life. So today when I walk around and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so fat in this outfit, I'm like, girl, you're not even going to remember that this day even existed. Who cares? But so the beings, like they didn't tell me who they were, because they didn't have to, because I just knew that they were people that were in charge of something. And there wasn't actually anything physical to see. I know that I was seeing things from my mind's eye, and I was constructing scenes, because everything was just a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And like the thought of the feeling, and then like you'd see like a little picture inside your mind's eye of it. So it looked like these beings were just these beautiful light bodies, just these beautiful, effervescent, like a human shape, but no features. And then in other parts of my experience, I just perceived the soul as a little orb of light. So I think the further that I got into my experience, I was kind of unraveling our true essence, which I think is just that little orb of light. But for me to fully comprehend it, or to be okay with it, I had to see the souls in human form at first, because it's something that I can grasp more than just like seeing these little balls of light.
Go with me, because I'm about to take us in an extreme left. And I ask very weird questions.
He gets downright just stupid at times.
Okay. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? How old are
40.
you? 40. Okay.
Oh, we're in the same ballpark.
And your name is Betty G. Okay.
Yes.
Let's say we live in a world where we weren't given names until we turned the age of 40. And not only were we not given names, but as soon as you turn 40, society wants to know your name. What do you call yourself? The native culture in the U.S., they have Little Bear or Running Waters because those things meant something to that person.
Yeah, throughout their life.
What would be your name?
No rush, Betty.
Wow, I love this question. That's so beautiful. I think the main part of my life now that I've reached where I am in life is really about metamorphosis. So any sort of alchemy or something like that would be how I would perceive myself. So whether it was something around a butterfly or the chrysalis that, a caterpillar goes into to transform into a butterfly, or just any sort of thing to do with the alchemical process from going from a base metal to gold. That's been my transformation in life. So I think I'd probably want to be called something like that.
You don't have a particular something, huh? Like I don't know, like amethyst or I don't know. You don't have like a name. You don't know, huh? I probably got you on the spot there.
I could give you a stripper name because amethyst sounds like a stripper name.
Does it?
For sure.
Well, you know what?
I think I would call myself Merkaba.
Merkaba.
Or Makaba, however you say it.
Right.
Yeah.
But the fact that Betty said a stripper name.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was like, if I were a stripper, and this is like real dialogue in Lamar's mind, I was like, my name would be Black Lavender. I don't know what I would wear, but
I love that.
Yeah.
You'd probably wear something that resembled lavender.
Yeah, I guess. Betty, what would you say to, because hearing your story, you're not religious, you were atheist, and the fact that you had your experience, like me, I didn't see God. I didn't see angels. I wasn't even privy to think about hell or, anything like that. But what would you tell like atheists that, you were once in their shoes? What advice would you have for them?
Wouldn't tell them anything. They're exactly where they're supposed to be.
And that's what I'm a firm believer
They are.
in.
I mean, they really are.
That. Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about not changing people's aspect. They're exactly where they need to be. But I also have to entertain the fact that if there was someone watching this and they really wanted to know, like if it was going to be something life-changing for them, would you have anything to just like give them to just kind of sleep on?
I mean, the fact that I was such a staunch atheist and that my life was so racked in trauma, and today there's no bondage over my past because I have a relationship with something higher than myself today. And you don't have to call it God. It's not some old man in the sky with a beard, right? I'm connected to this source of energy. And I feel like atheists can really perceive this concept, right? Because number one, it's proven in quantum physics now. We don't have to guess around if there is something more because we're getting new science around it all the time. But I really do think that people are at where they're at for a particular reason. And I look forward to hearing about their story of transformation. If I got woken up, everybody's getting woken up. Okay. Everybody.
Right. Did you ever come back? I don't know if we talked about this prior, but did you ever come back and just feel out of place? Like, I know for me, I had to deal with a lot of like acute depression from it. Did you ever feel like, man, now that I know all this life is really just like, now I have to find a way to reintegrate and get back to being a human being and judging people, not necessarily doing it intentionally, but having the emotions that come with being in the physical body?
Yeah, well, after my spiritual experience, I just thought that I was dead. I was like, oh my God, I went to heaven, I'm dead, and they shat me back down to earth, and now I'm stuck here. And so for a while, my life felt like purgatory because I was so miserable. And then I thought that I was bargaining with God. And so I was like, okay, God wants me to stop using drugs. So I'm going to stop using drugs. And so then I'd make it to a milestone. I'd be like, hey, God, I haven't used drugs in 2 weeks. Can I come back home yet?
Yeah.
And I'd get no response. And then I'd make it to 2 months and I'd say the same prayer. Please come get me. Don't leave me here. And so I just kept trying to get back to that spiritual experience. How can I experience the oneness again? How can I experience heaven again? And through my integration process, I realized that it's not about going back to heaven. It's about bringing heaven here. And I'm able to accomplish that through connection to other people. And that was not part of my life before. I was never around any people because I was so isolated in my addiction. But today, when I get to consciously connect with other people, it feels just like heaven. It feels just like that space that I was in. And so that's a beautiful understanding for me to live my life by that. But yeah, it definitely was super challenging until I found my spiritual communities where I found other experiencers and I found other people who were on the path to a deeper understanding. And I went through lots of different phases of community. At first, I thought I was supposed to be an evangelical Christian and go share the good news. And then I went to their churches for a while and I was like, this is not for me. This is crazy. Then I went to an all Black Baptist church because all I wanted to do was sing about Jesus and they were doing that. And I was like, this doesn't really fit me either, And then eventually I realized that I could cherry pick things out of all the different faiths and I could design my own spirituality around it. And so that's what I've been able to do now. So it feels much more comforting. I love my earth experience today. I never thought I would say that. I would even say that I would come back here again.
Yeah.
If given the chance. And if you would have asked me a couple years ago, I would have never said that. But now I've figured out how to enjoy life on earth. So I definitely want to experience more of it.
You know what's funny is, and I kind of like to hope that everyone has this feeling that I experience every day of my life, from the point where I wake up to the point where I go to sleep, is I always feel like there's someone greater watching me, keeping score in essence, or not a judgmental person, but I have this human instinct or spiritual instinct that, and it's not just one person, it is a collective of things just spectating.
Right.
And it just feels, in some ways it feels weird. But when you really tune into it, I could be writing music and sometimes I'll zone out, but I could really feel someone or something or multiple things just taking a peek and a glance at what I'm doing. And it's heavy. It's like it's on your shoulder, or it makes you want to go, what was that? You know?
Yeah. Like it's a tangible
And I wonder,
feeling.
do you feel that too? Do you feel as if, not like someone's playing you like a video game, but God, why are you guys watching me constantly?
I do. I'm really into the simulation theory. So I believe that I have a sim creator who's kind of, for lack of a better word, controlling my earth experience. Like we're in communication with each other. So my sim creator can bring me the things that will make my life optimal. So I do feel like there is something watching me. It doesn't feel heavy to me. In fact, it feels like it takes a big load off of me.
Okay.
And because I have this deep knowing in the pre-birth planning, there's no way for me to mess up my experience. So I don't have to be so in the mix of it. I don't have to have like all the dirt on my hands because I know that whatever's meant for me is going to happen regardless of what I do. So I don't have to worry too much. I don't have to be in that state of control. And I can just hand it over to a guide like, hey, you guys take this. I don't want this right now. But I love the idea of consciously creating through somebody else too. I feel like in those moments of creativity, there's definitely something coming through, something higher.
Yeah, and it has to be a simulation because even my higher self was telling me that we could have did this. You signed up for this, telling me that, you're going to put yourself in this capsule and live out this life. It doesn't matter how you look at it. Everyone's had that that's had an NDE. They had the life review. That was a part of the simulation, And so it has to be a big proponent of how it's all set up. I do remember, so for me, the only entity that I got, and it goes back to people watching, when that hand gathered up everything about me, the entity knew exactly who I was. And I swear to you, my experience, it was tailored to me. Like, cause it seems like it was that way for you. But did you get the sense that your experience was literally that? It was just tailored around you?
I mean, it put you in the freaking grocery store for crying out loud.
Right. And you're picking your lives off the shelf. I remember what I was supposed to do when I was on the other side, but I couldn't bring it back with me. But you actually remember picking the lessons off the shelves.
Yeah, I do think that there is some aspect of a singular personality before it kind of gets absorbed into the whole. I believe in the law of oneness. I know that we are all actually one, but we're playing these individual personality profiles, these avatars here. And then there's the higher aspect, who I also think has some sort of personality around it as well. And then it gets into the bigger concept of like an oversoul and then actually being connected directly to source. But yeah, my experience was funny. It was like totally, it was all me and my personality. So I feel like it was tailored that way for me, because otherwise I wouldn't have, if I would have went to heaven and like seen Jesus or like this Christian God, like sitting on a throne, like condemning me, I would have never, none of it would have resonated, you know? So it came to me the way that I could understand it. And for me, that was seeing it like a video game, like a Sims game.
Right. And that just goes to show that whatever your belief is, there's no one like out there just judging you 24/7. For those that believe in Jesus, that's what they need. But if I think of a higher power, I think of it all, the Alpha, the Omega, source, the universe. It has no skin in the game. You know, it just loves you how you went in, how you planned it, and how you come out. You know, why would it be so much rules that you have to abide to? Like you said, the bowling alley, we all have a life path. It may be like this. And you can deviate within the frames of the alley, the bowling alley with the blockers up, but you can't change the story because this is what you wrote. So I have this big understanding now too, that it's a free life. It's all free will, and you just have at it. You just take your go at it and make the best of it.
Do you think that I constantly juggle this in my mind, and I know what I think about it. I'm going to ask you what you think about it. Is there a thing of evil and good and negativity and positivity, or is it just that we are?
So I think that we live in a dual world. So we come to the earth experience for the experience of duality. I mean, we can't deny that duality exists. It absolutely does. There's duality all around us. There's light and dark. There's, there's sunlight, there's nighttime, and there's suffering and there's joy. And so for me, I absolutely think that there are those in this earth experience. In heaven, there's no such thing. It's only unconditional love. And that's probably pretty boring, which is why I think we come here over and over again, because we're like, I'm so tired of being loved all the time. Let me go down to earth. That bitch is on fire. And so like we come down here, because it's got to be funner than just sitting in unconditional love and joy. And,
Right.
When you look at the scale of consciousness, a picture of a scale of consciousness, at the bottom of the scale of consciousness, it's fear, grief, anger. And then as you start to rise up, you go into courage and acceptance and joy and unconditional love. And so I think that the whole earth experience is about going up and down that whole scale of consciousness on a day-to-day basis.
So do you have a zero fear of death now that you've experienced all of this?
Zero fear.
Yeah.
I won't say that I welcome it, but whatever you guys want to do. But I definitely don't have any fear of death.
Yeah,
that's so bliss.
I'll piggyback that too. Yeah, I would say heaven. That's how I perceived it. Lack of a better word, I called it heaven. But yeah, we probably sign up and go, I want to know what it's like to actually make physical love to someone, to be on a drug, to hate, to have jealousy, to laugh, to joke. You know, because if you're in a blissful state, we get it, you're learning. But if someone comes back to that blissful state because they did a tour on Earth and their shit is just so much more vibrant at a different frequency, then I'm gonna be like, yeah, I want to go get some of that shit, whatever that guy or that girl just took. You know, let me go do the Earth thing. Shoot me down. Let's go see what it's all about. You know, it's a good deal.
Yeah.
I mean, whether we're having these bad moments or not, what we perceive to be bad moments, they're what we call bad days. Universe doesn't think so, but I'll take it, like she said, I'll take it all over again. I mean, it's an experience. We're here to experience it. We may forget that we're here to do that, but if we all took time in the moment to like meditate and go, oh yeah, it's just a simulation. It's just a story. I'm just living out an experience.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Betty, I know you don't have much time left. We're trying to keep this one under an hour. Is there... I would like to go into monkeys, but I'm going to have to save that for a different time. We have
shamanistic monkeys.
Oh, yeah, we have a fascination with monkeys. But is there anything you want to say? How to reach you? How to get in contact with you? Any last messages you want to give to the people? You go ahead and you tear right into it.
So my closing thought that I love to share, number one, my experience has proven to me that there is no such thing as condemnation. So if you're somebody who's wrestling with trauma or wreckage of your past or anything like that, nobody's condemning you except for yourself. I have a private coaching business where I assist people through shadow work, healing trauma, and utilizing the law of attraction in their life. I'm on all social media. My handle on everything is buddabetty. It's a play on words. And I would love to connect, especially if you feel like you're having a hard time integrating a spiritual experience or you're having a hard time getting over something from your past. I'd love to connect you to some community. Even if I can't work with you individually, I would love to shepherd you to communities of people that can support you, because we come here with tribes of souls and we're meant to find each other. We're not meant to do anything by ourselves here.
You know what I would like to do one day? I'm going to put it out there in the universe. I would like to get a bunch of people in the middle of nowhere, nothing like a Burning Man type thing, get into a huge tent and musically, him and I can musically be shamans on a musical vibration aspect, and then have spiritual speakers guide a bunch of people to an overall meditation and a way to leave whatever society had for you at the fucking door.
Right.
And when you leave that place like just recharged.
Yeah.
Where if you if you had a bald spot on your head, damn it, you're fucking growing your hair back when you leave us. You know, I want to do something like that like once a year. So it's an annual thing and we all get together and it's almost like we practice what we preach.
Right.
You know, like we could just set this fucking thing up and we can roll with it.
Yeah. And it keeps you grounded.
And it keeps me accountable.
Yeah, for yourself.
You know? Yep. Yeah, I think you would be a great speaker for that.
I'm leaning to what he's putting down.
We'll just get a mic in front of you and we'll musically get you through it, Betty.
And we're not saying poison the water with mushrooms or peyote or anything like that, but we'll get them there. The music will get them there.
Vibration does a funny thing to you.
Yeah, it does.
So,
well, with that said, Betty, you've been a great guest. We love you tremendously.
Yes.
We'll always say that. And I wish you could have been here in person, but unfortunately the Zoom is going to has to suffice. But
I can still feel your energy through this damn camera though.
And if they knew the energy was setting off our electronics, they could probably still see the residual of our energy. It's very high over here.
And we never really have hiccups in here. That's how I know we're just resonating
we're
all.
zooming.
Yeah.
Well, like the damn channel, please.
Subscribe.
And ring the damn bell, please.
Just ring it. Would you like to ring the bell, Betty?
Just go ahead.
Just
do a little ring.
you want to?
No.
Yeah.
Well,
You had to be there.
shit. We're on. Yeah, there it is.
Well, shit.
She's got it.
There you
it
go.
is. We're on Etsy. We're on Patreon. Thanks for all the Patreon members. It does help. It keeps us going.
We're on TikTok.
Oh yeah, we're on. What else are we on?
We're on.
We're high on life too.
Yeah. I like to say we're on everything and anything.
He's already given too much. With that, peace, everybody.
Peace.